Have you noticed it? Are you starting to see the cracks in the foundation? Do you feel a shift of awareness in the air? Are you starting to question what is happening around you, in your family, in your area, in your country? If you're starting to notice changes within you and around you, welcome to Shift Your Perspective, a series where we explore our experiences by taking time to observe them and looking at them from a different point of view. Most of what shapes our lives isn't what happens to us. It's how we learn to see it. We move through the world responding to stories about who we are, what's possible, what's expected, what's true. Many of those stories were handed to us quietly through family, culture, education, belief systems, and survival. Over time, they began to feel like reality itself. This series exists to slow that process down. Shifting your perspective is not about telling you what to think. It's about helping you to notice how you think and how that shapes what you experience. Welcome to the first episode, called Patterns. This morning I woke up with the word pattern on my mind. It felt familiar, like something I had meant to write or talk about, but just hadn't quite finished it. So I sat with it. And what stood out wasn't urgency or alarm, but a quiet sense of clarity. Patterns are becoming easier to notice. The patterns are not new. They've always been there, but more people are beginning to recognize them in their everyday lives. We don't usually announce it by saying, "I see the pattern." It shows up more subtly. In moments when something feels off, when words and actions don't quite align, when the explanation no longer matches the experience. Over time, those small moments start to connect. People begin to notice repeated behavior, family cycles, situation where trust is given, expectations are set, and outcomes don't match what was promised. This happens in families, workplace, institutions, and communities. Some of these patterns are merely inconvenient. Others quietly wear people down. What's interesting is that once a pattern is noticed, it's difficult to unsee it. At that point, a question tends to arise, sometimes consciously, sometimes not, and you wonder, do I continue participating as I always have? Or do I respond differently now that I've noticed what's happening? There's no immediate answer, just awareness. On a personal level, each of us participates in patterns, many of them inherited, repeated, or learned early on in our lives. We often move through familiar cycles without questioning whether they still serve us. In fact, it's usually hardest to recognize a pattern while you're still in it. Observation takes a bit of a distance. Sometimes that distance comes from reflection, sometimes discomfort, and sometimes simply from repetition becoming too obvious to ignore. Even without conscious reflection, people tend to return to what's familiar. Familiar roles, familiar reactions, familiar outcomes. Patterns don't require agreement to continue. They only require your participation. Now, patterns don't always announce themselves dramatically. Often they appear as ordinary routines or reoccurring experiences. For example, waking up, going to work, coming home, and repeating that cycle without question whether it fits or not. Finding yourself in familiar conflicts across different relationships or environments. Putting sustained effort into a goal that never seems to materialize without understanding why. Or listening to guidance or authority figures whose actions consistently contradict their words, and noticing how often this is accepted as normal. These patterns exist across many areas of our life, and their familiarity can make them easy to overlook. One pattern that stands out for many people is the idea that struggle is required in order for life to improve. This message is often subtle. Work harder, endure more, push through, and eventually things will work out. While effort and persistence certainly have value, this narrative becomes questionable when examined closely. Most people can recall examples that don't fit this story. Instances where access, timing, support, or circumstance played a significant role. Yet the narrative persists, often repeated by those who benefited from the advantage that go unmentioned. Noticing this pattern doesn't require judgment, just honesty. So what can we do when we notice a pattern? The first step is simple, though not always comfortable, and that is acknowledging what you're noticing. I'm going to say that again. Acknowledging what you're noticing. From there, observation becomes useful, not accusatory, just observational. You ask yourself questions when observing. What is being said? What is being done? What isn't being addressed? And who benefits from this situation if this pattern continues as is? And how does my participation in this pattern affect me? Emotionally, mentally, and physically. Patterns often come with familiar emotional responses like confusion, frustration, anxiety, resignation. Paying attention to those responses can be as informative as the pattern itself. If a pattern no longer serves you, participation is not mandatory. Sometimes change begins not with confrontation, but with choosing not to engage in the same way anymore. When some can no longer participate in the pattern, they may feel compelled to go a step further. Not out of superiority or certainty, but out of responsibility. They begin to speak, write, or ask questions that gently point to inconsistencies others may also be sensing. This isn't always comfortable. It often requires stepping out of familiar roles and expectations. And it doesn't have to be loud. Sometimes it takes the form of writing, quiet conversations, or simply modeling a different way of responding in your life. Change rarely comes from force. More often, it begins with one person choosing not to repeat what no longer makes sense. And know this, patterns don't usually break all at once. They weaken at the edges. When enough people pause, question, or respond differently, small cracks form. Through those cracks, alternatives become possible. New choices appear. New ways of living take shape. Once something is clearly seen, the responsibility shifts to the individual. Not to fix everything, but to choose how to move forward. Some will remain where they are. Others will chart a different course. Neither choice needs justification. Patterns are shifting where people are observing and questioning. And for those willing to pay attention, not to judge or convince, but to simply notice, clarity has a way of spreading quietly, one moment at a time. If even one moment caused you to pause to reconsider a reaction, a belief, or a long-held story, then this series is meant for you. You don't need to agree with everything you encounter here. You don't need to resonate with every reflection. This is an invitation to look again, to notice what's been there all along, to see life in each other with a little more clarity. And if this helps you to shift your perspective, I'll see you in the next shift.